The full moon hung like a silver coin in the obsidian sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets of the market district. Kiva Galapagos moved through the darkness like a phantom, her white hair gleaming under the lunar light, her crimson dress flowing behind her like spilled wine. At 23, she had walked this world long enough to know that beauty and danger often dance together in the moonlight, and tonight, she could taste violence in the air. The scream pierced the night before she saw its source. Kiva's hand instinctively moved to the blade concealed beneath her dress, her body already turning toward the sound. Years of training had taught her to move before thinking, to act before fear could take root. She had been forged in combat since childhood, shaped by a past she rarely spoke of, hardened by losses that still haunted her dreams. Tonight, those skills would serve a purpose she could never have imagined. In the alley ahead, 5 warriors surrounded a frail figure. The old woman clutched a worn satchel to her chest, her silver hair disheveled, her eyes wide with terror. The men laughed, their voices cruel and careless, weapons glinting in the moonlight like promises of pain. "Please," the old woman whispered, her voice trembling, "I have nothing of value." "That's for us to decide, grandmother," the largest warrior sneered, reaching for her bag. Kiva didn't announce herself. She simply moved. The first warrior fell before the others realized she was there, her heel connecting with his temple in a strike that sent him crumpling to the ground. The second turned, surprise etched across his face, but Kiva was already spinning, her dress whirling around her like a red storm as her elbow found his jaw. The crack echoed through the alley. "What the third warrior began, drawing his blade. But Kiva was poetry in motion, every movement precise, every strike calculated. She had spent her life preparing for moments like this, training when others slept, pushing herself when others rested. Her body was a weapon, honed and deadly, and these men were about to learn the cost of preying on the innocent. She ducked beneath a wild swing, feeling the air part above her head. Her fist drove into the warrior's solar plexus, stealing his breath. As he doubled over, she brought her knee up to meet his descending face. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. The remaining 2 backed away, fear replacing their earlier confidence. Kiva could see the calculation in their eyes, the moment when bravado crumbled against the reality of her skill. These were men accustomed to preying on the weak, to using numbers and intimidation to get what they wanted. They had never faced someone who fought back with such precision, such controlled fury. "Leave now," Kiva said, her voice low and cold as winter wind, "or join your friends on the ground." She could feel her heart pounding, not from exertion, but from the familiar rush of combat, the clarity that came when survival depended on split-second decisions. This was who she was, who she had always been. A warrior born, shaped by circumstances she could never change, defined by choices she made every day. One was smart enough to run, disappearing into the shadows without looking back. The other, foolish enough to try his luck, let pride override sense. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. He lunged at her with a roar, blade slashing toward her throat. Kiva sidestepped, caught his wrist, and twisted. The blade clattered to the cobblestones. She swept his legs, using his own momentum against him, and he hit the ground hard enough to rattle his teeth. Her foot pressed against his chest, applying just enough pressure to keep him down. "I said leave," she repeated. He scrambled away the moment she released him, disappearing into the shadows like smoke. Silence fell over the alley, broken only by the soft groans of the unconscious warriors and the old woman's ragged breathing. Kiva turned to her, extending a gentle hand, her demeanor shifting from warrior to protector in a heartbeat. "Are you hurt?" Kiva asked softly, helping the woman to her feet. The old woman looked up at her with eyes that held surprising clarity, despite her earlier fear. They were eyes that had seen much, endured more, and recognized something in Kiva that even Kiva herself might not know. "Child," she breathed, gripping Kiva's hands with surprising strength. You are a blessing sent by the moon herself. I don't know how to thank you. No thanks needed, Kiva said, retrieving the woman's satchel from where it had fallen. Are you far from home? I can walk with you. That's kind of you, dear. The old woman studied Kiva's face in the moonlight, something unreadable flickering across her features. May I know the name of my savior? Kiva. Kiva Galapagos. Kiva, the woman repeated, as if tasting the name, memorizing it. I am Alara Ironcrest. The name meant nothing to Kiva, but she nodded politely, offering her arm for support. As they walked through the quiet streets, Alara spoke, her voice carrying the weight of untold stories. I must confess something to you, child. I am not just some helpless old woman lost in the night. I am the mother of the Alpha King. Kiva's steps faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. The Alpha King, Corbin Ironcrest. Even in her solitary existence, she had heard the stories. A ruler both feared and revered, a warrior whose strength was matched only by his ruthlessness in protecting his territory. A man who had apparently been searching for his missing mother for years. Your son must be worried sick, Kiva said carefully. Alara's expression darkened, shadows deepening the lines around her eyes. He doesn't know I'm missing yet. I left the palace 3 days ago, chasing a memory, a piece of my past I thought I had lost forever. But I got turned around, confused. The city has changed so much since I was young. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. There are things happening in the palace, Kiva. Things that made me feel unsafe in my own home. I needed time to think, to understand, but I fear I've only made things worse. Someone is threatening you, in the palace? Not threatening exactly, but watching. Always watching. I felt like a prisoner in silk, my every move monitored, my every conversation reported. I needed to breathe, to remember who I was before I became the mother of a king. Ilara's grip tightened on Kiva's arm. Promise me you won't tell anyone you found me. Not yet. I need to return on my own terms. Kiva wanted to argue, wanted to point out the danger the old woman was in, but something in Ilara's eyes stopped her. This was a woman who had survived more than most could imagine, who had raised a son powerful enough to command respect from the fiercest warriors. She deserved her dignity, her choice. I promise, Kiva said quietly, but at least let me ensure you get home safely. There are more dangers than thieves in these streets. Alara smiled, warmth breaking through her worry like sunrise through storm clouds. You remind me of someone I knew once. She had your fire, your strength. She died protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, much as you did tonight. They continued walking, and Alara began to speak of her son, painting a picture of a man Kiva had never imagined beneath the crown. She spoke of a boy who cried when he found injured animals, who stayed up nights learning to heal them. She spoke of a young man who took the throne too early, thrust into power by tragedy, forced to become steel when he wanted to be silk. He's alone now, Alara said softly. He pushes everyone away, afraid that closeness will bring pain. He rules with an iron fist because he believes it's the only way to keep his people safe. But I see the loneliness in his eyes, the weight he carries. He needs someone who can see past the crown, past the power. Someone strong enough to stand beside him, not behind him. Kiva listened, her heart unexpectedly stirring at the portrait of this isolated king. She had spent her own life alone, choosing solitude over vulnerability, strength over connection. Perhaps she and this Alpha King were not so different. They reached the edge of the palace district as dawn began to paint the horizon in shades of rose and gold. Alara stopped, turning to face Kiva with an expression that held both gratitude and something deeper, something that looked almost like hope. Kiva Galapagos, You have given me more than my life tonight. You've reminded me that there are still warriors with honor in this world, people who fight not for glory, but for what's right. She reached into her satchel and withdrew a small pendant, silver wrought in the shape of a crescent moon, with a wolf at its center. Take this. It bears my personal seal. If you ever need anything at all, come to the palace and show this to the guards. They will bring you to me. Kiva tried to refuse, but Alara pressed it into her palm with a knowing smile. I have a feeling, the old woman said mysteriously, that we will see each other again very soon, perhaps sooner than either of us expects. Then she was gone, disappearing through a servant's entrance with the grace of someone who knew the palace's secret ways. Kiva stood alone in the breaking dawn, the pendant cool against her palm, wondering why her heart felt heavier now than before she'd saved the old woman. She had spent years building walls around herself, protecting her heart from the wounds that connection inevitably brought. But something about Alara's words, about the image of a lonely king in a cold palace, had stirred something in her chest, she thought long dead. She returned to her small room above the blacksmith's shop where she worked, the pendant tucked away in her pocket, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept returning to Alara's words, to the picture she had painted of her son. A king who ruled with iron but bled with the rest of them. A man who had everything except what mattered most. The room felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in as memories threatened to overwhelm her. She had chosen this solitude deliberately, built it brick by brick after losing everyone who mattered. Her parents, taken by disease when she was barely 10. The mentor who raised her afterward, killed defending their village from raiders. Every person she had dared to care about had been ripped away, leaving her with nothing but survival skills and a determination never to feel that kind of pain again. Yet something about Alara's story had cracked the armor she wore around her heart. The image of a lonely king in a cold palace mirrored her own isolation too closely to ignore. She wondered if he too lay awake at night, staring at ceilings, counting the ways he kept the world at arm's length. She wondered if he felt the same hollow ache she carried, the sense that life was something to endure rather than embrace. Dawn found her at the forge, seeking solace in familiar work, in the honest simplicity of hammer meeting steel. The fire roared, casting dancing shadows across the workshop walls. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked, her muscles moving with practiced precision. This was her meditation, her prayer, her way of making sense of a world that often made no sense at all. Kiva was working the forge, her arms aching from hammering out a new blade, sweat dampening her white hair, when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up, expecting to see a regular customer, and instead found herself staring at the most commanding presence she had ever encountered. He stood in the doorway, like a storm-given human form, tall and broad-shouldered, with long black hair tied back from a face that could have been carved from granite. A thick beard framed a jaw set with determination, and his eyes, dark as midnight, swept the shop with predatory awareness. He wore simple traveling clothes, but they couldn't disguise the power that radiated from him like heat from the forge. This was a man who knew violence intimately, who wore authority like a second skin. Their eyes met, and Kiva felt something slam into her chest with the force of a warhammer. Recognition, but not the kind born from previous meeting. This was deeper, more primal, like her soul had been searching for something it didn't know was missing until this exact moment. The man seemed equally affected, his eyes widening slightly, his hand moving unconsciously to his chest as if to steady a racing heart. "I'm looking for a weapon," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in Kiva's bones. "Something custom. I was told the blacksmith here does exceptional work." Kiva found her voice, though it came out rougher than intended. "That would be me. What kind of weapon?" "A blade. Long. Balanced for someone of my height and strength. I need it to be perfect, unbreakable." He moved deeper into the shop, his presence seeming to fill every corner. Can you do that? I can make you a blade that will serve you well, Kiva said, meeting his gaze with challenge in her own. But nothing is unbreakable. Everything has its limits, its weakness. The question is whether you're skilled enough to ensure yours never reaches its breaking point. A smile ghosted across his lips, appreciation flickering in those dark eyes. Wise words. What's your name, blacksmith? Kiva Galapagos. And you are? He hesitated for the barest moment, and Kiva could have sworn she saw something vulnerable flash across his features before the mask returned. Corbin. Just Corbin. No title, no surname. But Kiva knew. She had seen enough paintings, heard enough descriptions. This was the Alpha King, standing in her modest shop, asking her to forge him a weapon. Corbin, she repeated, choosing to honor his apparent desire for anonymity. When do you need this blade? I can wait for quality. A week? 2? 2 weeks. Come back for measurements and to discuss the design. He nodded, but didn't move toward the door. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. You're strong, he observed. I can see it in how you hold yourself, how you move. Not many women choose the forge. Not many women are given the choice, Kiva replied, an edge entering her voice. I took mine. Good. His approval felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. The world needs more people who take their own choices instead of accepting what's handed to them. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something, Kiva? Like your whole life has been preparing you for a moment that hasn't arrived yet? Her breath caught. Every day. Their eyes held for a long moment. Something electric and undeniable crackling in the space between them. Then he was gone, leaving Kiva standing in the wake of his presence, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. That night, Kiva couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he moved with lethal grace, about the intelligence burning in his eyes, about the sense that she had just encountered something that would irrevocably change her life. She pulled out Alara's pendant, turning it over in her fingers, and understanding struck like lightning. Corbin Ironcrest. The Alpha King. The lonely son Alara had described with such love and concern. The man who had just commissioned a blade from her. Sleep was impossible. Kiva paced her small room, her mind racing with questions and complications. Should she tell him she had found his mother? Should she reveal that she knew his identity? What game was fate playing, bringing them together like this? When dawn came, she had made her decision. She would honor Alara's request for privacy, but she would keep her promise to ensure the old woman's safety. And as for Corbin, she would forge him the finest blade she had ever created, and she would see where this strange connection led. Over the next 2 weeks, Corbin returned to her shop daily. Each visit started with discussions about the blade he wanted forged, about balance and edge retention, about the way steel sang when properly tempered. But their conversations inevitably drifted to other topics. The first time he came back, Kiva was ready. She had sketched designs, considered his height and build, calculated the weight distribution that would serve him best. But when he walked through her door, all her professional preparations scattered like ash in the wind. His presence filled the space, made the air feel charged, electric. I've been thinking about what you said, he began without preamble. About everything having its limits, its weakness. It's true, but I wonder if acknowledging weakness makes us stronger, or just more vulnerable. Kiva set down her tools, giving him her full attention. Both, I think. Denial doesn't make weakness disappear. It just means you can't prepare for it, can't protect it. Better to know where you're vulnerable so you can defend it properly. His eyes held an intensity that made her skin warm. And what about you, Kiva? Where are you vulnerable? The question was too intimate, too probing, but she found herself answering honestly. Everywhere. That's why I protect everything. That sounds exhausting. It is. The admission surprised her. But it's safer than the alternative. He moved closer, studying her face as if trying to memorize every detail. And what is the alternative? Letting someone close enough to hurt you. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away even though her heart was racing. Giving them the power to destroy you. Or save you, he suggested softly. Those words hung between them, heavy with implication, and Kiva felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening that she had kept locked for years. The next day, he brought her coffee, strong and bitter the way she liked it, though she had never told him her preference. I asked the shop owner what the white-haired blacksmith always ordered, he explained at her surprised expression. I wanted to know everything about you. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Because you fascinate me. Simple words, but they landed with the weight of a vow. I meet hundreds of people every month. Advisors, warriors, nobles seeking favor. They all want something from me. All see the crown before they see the man. But you look at me like I'm just another customer, like my title means nothing. Does it bother you? No. He smiled, and it transformed his stern features into something almost boyish. It's the most refreshing thing I've experienced in years. He spoke of leadership's burden, of choices that left scars no one else could see. She spoke of independence hard-won, of finding strength in solitude. They talked about philosophy and combat, about art and honor, about the way the moon looked different when you were truly alone. On the third visit, he stayed for hours, watching her work, asking questions about metallurgy and technique. His intelligence surprised her, the way he grasped complex concepts quickly, the thoughtful questions that revealed a mind constantly seeking to understand. You could learn this, she said, feeling bold. Blacksmithing, if you wanted. Would you teach me? The question was casual, but his eyes held something vulnerable, hopeful. Maybe, if you prove to be a decent student. I'm a terrible student, he admitted with a laugh. I question everything, challenge my teachers, push back against instruction. Then we'll get along fine, Kiva replied, surprising herself with the warmth in her voice. I don't want obedience. I want engagement. With each visit, the masks they wore for the world slipped a little further. He told her about the weight of a crown inherited too young, about making decisions that cost lives no matter which choice he made. She told him about learning to fight, because the world was cruel to those who couldn't defend themselves, about choosing isolation because grief was a burden she couldn't bear again. Why do you live alone? He asked one evening, watching her work the bellows, firelight dancing across her pale features, illuminating the determination in her movements. Why does anyone? Kiva replied, not looking at him, focusing on the flames that needed stoking. People leave, people die, people disappoint. It's easier to rely only on yourself. Easier, he agreed quietly, moving closer without seeming to realize it. But not better. She finally met his eyes, seeing her own loneliness reflected there like a mirror image. And what do you know of better, Corbin? You seem like a man who understands solitude well. Too well. He moved closer, drawn by a force neither could name. I've spent years building walls, Kiva, convincing myself that strength meant standing alone, that to be untouchable meant to be safe. But lately I've begun to wonder if I've simply made myself a prisoner of my own making. We're all prisoners of something, Kiva said softly, her hands stilling on her work. The question is whether we have the courage to seek freedom. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not quite touching, as if afraid she would vanish if he made contact. What if freedom means risking everything? What if it means letting someone pass the walls? Then you have to decide, she whispered, her heart thundering in her chest. Whether being safe is worth dying slowly from loneliness. His hand finally made contact, his calloused fingers gentle as they traced her jaw. The touch sent electricity racing through her veins, awakening parts of her she thought dead. She should pull away, should maintain the distance that had kept her safe for so long. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, her eyes closing as she savored the simple human connection she had denied herself for years. Kiva, he breathed, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, a plea, a promise. But before either could move closer, the shop door burst open. A warrior stood there, his face flushed with exertion, his eyes finding Corbin immediately. "Your Majesty," he gasped, and Kiva's eyes flew open. "Forgive the interruption, but there's been an incident at the palace. Your presence is required immediately." The moment shattered. Corbin stepped back, the warmth in his expression replaced by the cold mask of the Alpha King. He glanced at Kiva, reading the understanding in her eyes. "You knew," he said quietly. "I suspected. And you said nothing? You came here seeking anonymity. I honored that." She met his gaze steadily. "Besides, you're still just Corbin to me. The crown doesn't change who you are in here." Something in his expression softened. "I have to go. But Kiva, this conversation isn't over." "I know." He left with his guard, but the space he vacated felt emptier than it had any right to. Kiva returned to the forge, throwing herself into work with renewed intensity, trying to ignore the way her hand still tingled where his had touched her face. The blade she was forging for him took shape under her hammer, each strike imbued with more than just skill. She poured her confusion into it, her loneliness, her awakening hope. This would be more than a weapon. It would be a promise forged in steel. 3 days passed without word from Corbin, and Kiva found herself watching the door with embarrassing frequency. She told herself it was professional concern, that she simply wanted to finish the commission. But her heart knew the truth. In those brief weeks, the Alpha King had slipped past defenses she had spent years constructing, and she was terrified of what that meant. On the 4th day, Ilara appeared at her shop. The old woman looked haggard, worry etched deep in the lines of her face. "Kiva, thank the moon I found you. I need your help." Kiva ushered her inside quickly, closing the door against curious eyes. "What's wrong? Are you in danger?" "Not me. Corbin." Ilara's hands shook as she gripped Kiva's arms. "He's become convinced I've been kidnapped or killed. He's turning the city upside down, arresting anyone who might have information. His grief and rage are consuming him. I've tried to return, tried to let him know I'm safe, but the guards I trusted are the ones who made me flee. They won't let me near him." Understanding crashed over Kiva like cold water. The ones who were watching you, they're keeping you from your son? They've poisoned him against me, made him think I was in danger from outside threats when the danger was always within the palace walls. There's a coup brewing, Kiva. They want Corbin vulnerable, isolated. They want him to make mistakes born from grief so they can undermine his authority. Kiva's mind raced, tactical instincts honed from years of training kicking into gear. "We need proof. We need to expose them. We need to get me to Corbin, but they watch every entrance to the palace. They'll kill me before they let me reach him, eliminate the one person who could reveal their treason." Ilara's eyes pleaded. "But you, Kiva, you have the pendant. You have access. And more than that, you have my son's trust. I saw how he looked at you when he thought no one was watching. I saw the softness in his eyes, the way he smiled when he spoke of the blacksmith who challenged him." Heat rose in Kiva's cheeks. "He spoke of me?" "Constantly." Ilara smiled despite the gravity of the situation. "You've reached him, child. You've touched a heart I feared had frozen beyond thaw. Now I'm asking you to use that connection to save him. Bring me to the palace. Help me reach my son before it's too late." Kiva didn't hesitate. "Tell me everything you know about these traitors." They planned through the night, mapping out the palace's layout based on Alara's intimate knowledge, identifying the conspirators, strategizing their approach. By dawn, they were ready. Kiva wore her finest dress, the crimson one that had become her armor in a different kind of battle. She strapped hidden blades to her thighs, concealed weapons in her hair, prepared herself for violence while praying they could avoid it. Alara would travel in disguise as her elderly servant, hidden in plain sight. The palace gates loomed before them like the mouth of some great beast. Kiva presented the pendant to the guards, her voice steady and confident. "Lady Ironcrest bids me attend her. I have personal business with the Alpha King's mother." The guards examined the pendant, surprise flickering across their features. This was an authentic royal seal, impossible to forge. They had no choice but to grant entry. The palace was a masterpiece of architecture and intimidation, all soaring ceilings and marble columns, tapestries depicting great battles and profound victories. Servants hurried through halls with heads bowed, their movements quick and fearful. An atmosphere of tension permeated every stone, every whispered conversation. Kiva and Alara moved through the corridors with purpose, Alara directing them toward Corbin's private study. But as they rounded a corner, they found their path blocked by 5 men in palace guard uniforms, their hands on their weapons, their expressions cold and knowing. "I'm afraid you're lost, blacksmith," the leader said, his smile sharp as broken glass. "These halls are restricted. I bear Lady Ironcrest's seal. I have every right to be here." "Lady Ironcrest is dead," another guard sneered. "Has been for days now. So whoever gave you that pendant was an imposter, a thief, and you're complicit in their crime." Kiva felt Alara tense beside her and squeezed the old woman's hand in warning. "Stay calm. Stay hidden." "Then I'll take my complaint directly to the Alpha King," Kiva said coldly. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." The guards drew their weapons, steel whispering against leather. "You see, the king is indisposed with grief. He's not seeing anyone. And you, dear blacksmith, are going to disappear, just like the old woman did." They moved to surround her, confident in their numbers, their training. They saw a single woman in a dress, an elderly servant cowering behind her. They saw easy prey. They were about to learn their mistake. Kiva moved like lightning given human form. Her hand went to her thigh, drawing the concealed blade in one fluid motion. She deflected the first guard's strike and drove her blade into his shoulder, forcing him to drop his weapon with a howl of pain. She spun, her dress flaring like blood spreading across water, and her foot connected with the second guard's knee, hyperextending it with an audible crack. The remaining 3 converged, thinking to overwhelm her with coordinated attacks. Kiva was faster. She ducked beneath one blade, used the attacker's momentum to throw him into his companion, and they went down in a tangle of limbs and cursing. The final guard managed to get close, his sword arcing toward her neck. Kiva caught his wrist, twisted until his grip loosened and swept his legs. As he fell, she relieved him of his weapon and pressed the point to his throat. "Now," she said, breathing hard, her white hair wild around her face, her dress torn but her eyes blazing with fury. "You're going to take us to the Alpha King, and you're going to explain to him why you just tried to murder the woman carrying his mother's seal." "She's alive?" one of the downed guards gasped. "But we were told—" "You were told lies," Alara said, stepping forward and pulling back her hood. "Lies meant to make my son vulnerable, to undermine his rule. And you all fell for it like the treasonous fools you are." The sound of running footsteps echoed through the hall. More guards appeared, but these wore different insignia, different expressions. These were loyal to the king. "Stand down," their captain ordered, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "What is the meaning of this?" "Captain Aldrich," Alara said with relief. "Thank the moon. These men are traitors. They've been holding me prisoner, feeding false information to my son. Arrest them." Captain Aldrich's eyes widened in recognition and disbelief. "Lady Ironcrest? You're alive? But the king, he's been—" He turned to his men. "Arrest these traitors immediately, and someone fetch the Alpha King. Tell him his mother has returned." The traitors were hauled away, still groaning from Kiva's efficient dismantling of their forces. Captain Aldrich escorted Kiva and Alara deeper into the palace, toward the royal wing, toward Corbin. They found him in his study, standing at the window overlooking the city, his broad shoulders bowed under invisible weight. He didn't turn when they entered, his voice rough as gravel. "Captain, I gave orders not to be disturbed." "Your Majesty," Aldrich said gently. "There's someone here to see you." "I told you, I'm seeing no one. Not until—" "Corbin." Alara's voice cut through his despair like a blade through silk. He spun, his face transforming from grief to shock to desperate hope in the space of a heartbeat. "Mother?" Alara opened her arms, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I'm here, my son. I'm here." Corbin crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled his mother into an embrace that spoke of a boy's relief and a king's desperation. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Kiva felt her own eyes burning as she witnessed the reunion. "I thought you were dead," he whispered into Alara's hair. "I thought I'd lost you. I've been going mad, Mother, tearing the city apart trying to find you, seeing threats in every shadow." "I know, darling, I know, but I'm safe, thanks to her." Alara pulled back, gesturing to Kiva, who had been trying to melt into the background. "She found me 3 weeks ago, saved me from attackers in the market district. She kept me safe, honored my request for discretion, until I could expose the traitors in your own guard." Corbin's eyes found Kiva, and the weight of his gaze made her breath catch. In his face she saw a dozen emotions warring for dominance. Relief, gratitude, confusion, and something deeper, something that made her heart race. "You knew where she was," he said slowly. "All those days I came to your shop, all those conversations, and you knew." "She asked me not to tell," Kiva said simply. "She needed time to understand what was happening, to gather proof. I couldn't betray her trust. Even knowing what I was going through, even watching me tear myself apart with grief and rage." Kiva met his eyes steadily, refusing to look away from the pain there. "Even then, because she trusted me when she was at her most vulnerable, and I don't break my promises. Not for anyone." Something in his expression shifted, the anger melting into something like awe. "You're remarkable," he breathed. "She's more than remarkable," Alara interjected, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "She defeated 5 palace guards by herself just now, protecting me from the traitors who wanted me silenced. She fought like a warrior born, like someone meant for greater things than a blacksmith's forge." "5 guards?" Corbin's eyebrows rose. "Kiva, I knew you were strong, but—" "I told you I made my own choices," Kiva interrupted. "One of those choices was to learn to protect myself and others. Another was to honor my word, even when it was difficult. And another was—" She hesitated, then decided to be brave. "Another was to trust you with the truth, even though I barely know you." Captain Aldrich cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we should interrogate the traitors, discover the full extent of the conspiracy." "Yes, do that. But Aldrich, show them no mercy. Anyone who would hurt my mother, who would manipulate me in my grief, deserves the full weight of the king's justice." The captain saluted and withdrew, leaving the 3 of them alone in the study. Alara, with the wisdom of mothers everywhere, recognized a moment when her presence was no longer needed. "Corbin, darling, I'm exhausted. I should rest." "Kiva, would you stay?" Keep my son company? I believe you two have much to discuss." Before either could protest, she slipped from the room, closing the door with a decisive click. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and undeniable attraction. Corbin moved to a sideboard, poured 2 glasses of wine, and offered one to Kiva. Their fingers brushed as she accepted, and the spark of contact made them both draw in sharp breaths. "I don't know whether to thank you or rage at you," Corbin admitted, taking a long drink. "You saved my mother's life. You kept her safe when I couldn't. But you let me suffer. Let me believe the worst." "Would you have done differently?" Kiva asked quietly. "If someone you barely knew told you your mother was safe but couldn't tell you where, couldn't bring her to you until the threat was neutralized, would you have thanked them or imprisoned them for withholding information?" He considered this, his expression thoughtful. "You're right. I would have seen it as a threat, a manipulation. I was too consumed by grief to think clearly." He set down his glass and moved closer to her, his presence overwhelming in the intimate space. "But now, I know the truth. Now I can see clearly. And what I see is a woman of extraordinary courage and loyalty. A woman who fights for what's right, not what's easy. A woman I can't stop thinking about." Kiva's heart slammed against her ribs. "Corbin!" "Don't." He raised a hand, stopping her protest. "Don't tell me I'm wrong. Don't tell me you don't feel this too. I've spent weeks trying to understand why a blacksmith shop felt more like home than my palace, why conversations about steel and strength made me feel more alive than ruling a kingdom. And now I understand. It wasn't the shop. It was you." "I'm no one," Kiva whispered, fear making her voice shake. "I'm a blacksmith, a woman with no family, no connections, no—" "You're everything." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses earned from years of wielding weapons. "You're fierce and honest and loyal. You challenge me, question me, see past the crown to the man beneath. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you saved my mother without expecting reward. I know you honored her trust even when it cost you. I know you can defeat 5 trained warriors without breaking a sweat. I know you forge steel with the same passion I've only ever felt for battle." His thumbs traced her cheekbones, and she found herself leaning into the touch, drowning in the dark depths of his eyes. "I know that when I'm with you, I feel less alone than I have in years. Tell me you don't feel the same. Tell me this connection is only in my mind, and I'll walk away." Kiva tried to speak, tried to deny the truth screaming in her chest, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. She felt it too, this impossible pull, this sense that she had been waiting her whole life to meet him. In his presence, her carefully constructed walls crumbled to dust. In his eyes, she saw a future she had never dared to imagine. "I'm terrified," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I've spent so long alone, so long believing that connection would only bring pain. What if we're wrong? What if this doesn't work?" "Then we'll face that together," he said simply. "But Kiva, I've faced armies. I've made impossible choices, survived betrayals and losses that would break lesser men. None of that scares me as much as the thought of letting you walk out of this palace and never seeing you again. So I'm asking you, I'm begging you, give us a chance. Let me prove that some risks are worth taking." She could barely breathe, could barely think past the want surging through her veins. Every instinct she had honed over the years screamed at her to run, to protect herself before she got hurt. But a quieter voice, one she had ignored for too long, whispered a different truth. Some walls were meant to be torn down. "Yes," she breathed, and the word felt like freedom, like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. "Yes, I'll give us a chance." His smile was radiant, transforming his stern features into something beautiful and vulnerable. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, as if she were something precious, something worth protecting. She melted into the embrace, feeling his heart thunder against her cheek, matching the wild rhythm of her own. "I should warn you," he murmured into her hair. "I'm not easy to love. I'm demanding and stubborn. I have a kingdom to rule and enemies who would use you against me. I can't promise this will be simple or safe." Kiva pulled back enough to meet his eyes, a fierce smile curving her lips. "I defeated 5 warriors to save your mother. I think I can handle a stubborn king." He laughed, and the sound was like music, like joy given voice. "You're going to be trouble, aren't you?" "Absolutely." He kissed her then, and it felt like coming home. His lips were gentle but insistent, tasting of wine and promise. Kiva rose on her toes, threading her fingers through his long hair, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. Heat flooded through her, desire mixing with something deeper, more profound. This was more than attraction. This was recognition. 2 souls finally finding their match. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Corbin rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Stay here, in the palace. Let me court you properly. Let me show you that you're not alone anymore. I have a shop to run, a business. Bring your forge here. Set up a workshop in the palace. I need new weapons anyway, and I can't think of anyone I'd trust more to create them." He grinned, boyish and charming. "Besides, how else will I ensure you finish my blade? You've been working on it for weeks." "It's almost done," she protested, laughing. "I was going to deliver it this week." "No need. You're here now. You can bring it yourself when it's ready. Along with everything else you need to make this palace your home." It was too fast, too much, but somehow it felt right. Kiva found herself nodding, agreeing to upend her entire life for a man she had known only weeks. But he didn't feel like a stranger. He felt like a missing piece finally sliding into place. Over the following months, Kiva moved into the palace, setting up her forge in the east wing, where the acoustics carried the ring of hammer on anvil like a song. She spent her days crafting weapons of exceptional quality, and her evenings with Corbin, learning the complex dance of loving a king. It wasn't always easy. He was as stubborn as she'd warned, prone to making decisions without consulting her, frustrated when she challenged his authority. But he was also tender beyond measure, showing her a gentleness he revealed to no one else. With his people, his warriors, his council, he was the Alpha King, fierce and unyielding. But with her, he was simply Corbin, a man who laughed at her jokes, who listened to her opinions, who held her through nightmares and kissed her awake with sunrise. Ilara watched their relationship bloom with undisguised delight, often remarking that she had known from the moment Kiva saved her that the young woman was destined for greater things. "You're the daughter I never had," she told Kiva one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. "The warrior I was in my youth, but with a softer heart. You've brought light back to my son's eyes, given him something to fight for beyond duty." "He's given me something too," Kiva admitted, touching the pendant she still wore around her neck. "A family, a purpose beyond simple survival. I never thought I could have this." "Love often comes when we least expect it, child, and yours is the kind poets write about, the kind that changes the course of history." Kiva blushed, embarrassed by the grandiosity of the statement, but she couldn't deny the truth in Ilara's words. What she and Corbin shared was rare, powerful, a connection that seemed to deepen with each passing day. The traitors were dealt with swiftly and publicly, their conspiracy exposed for all to see. Corbin's rule, strengthened by the revelation of the plot against him, became more secure than ever. But he ruled differently now, with Kiva's counsel tempering his harsher instincts, her compassion balancing his pragmatism. "You make me better," he told her one night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the moon full and bright above them. I was becoming cold, Kiva, hard. I was forgetting that ruling isn't just about strength, it's about wisdom and mercy too. You remind me of that every day. You were never as cold as you thought, she countered, leaning against his chest as his arms encircled her waist. You were just lonely, protecting yourself the only way you knew how. But you don't have to do that anymore. You have me now. You have us. Us, he repeated, savoring the word. I like the sound of that. 6 months after Kiva moved into the palace, Corbin proposed, not with grand ceremony or public spectacle, but privately, in her forge, where sparks flew from heated steel and the air smelled of coal and sweat. He knelt among the tools of her trade, presenting a ring he had made himself, crude but heartfelt. She had been working late, as she often did when her mind was too active for sleep. The rhythmic sound of hammer on anvil was her lullaby, her comfort. When Corbin appeared in the doorway, still dressed in his formal council attire, she had smiled at the incongruity of his royal bearing in her humble workshop. Couldn't sleep? She had asked, setting down her tools. I can never sleep well when I'm not with you, he admitted, moving into the forge's warm glow. And tonight, I have something I need to say. Something I've been trying to find the courage to voice for weeks. Kiva's heart had begun to race, hope and fear warring in her chest. I'm no blacksmith, he said, his voice rough with emotion as he knelt before her, the king humbling himself before a woman who had started life with nothing. But I wanted to give you something I made with my own hands, something that represents how much you've changed me. He opened a small box, revealing a ring that was indeed crude by master standards, but bore the unmistakable marks of hours of patient labor, of a man learning a craft to honor the woman he loved. Marry me, Kiva, not because you'll be queen, though you will be. Not because it will unite us politically, though it will. Marry me because I love you. Because you're my best friend, my fiercest defender, my greatest challenge, and my softest place to land. Marry me because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Tears had streamed down Kiva's cheeks, and for once she didn't try to hide them. This man, this powerful, complicated, beautiful man, had entered her life like a storm and reshaped everything she thought she knew about herself. He had proven that walls could be climbed, that hearts could heal, that love wasn't weakness, but the greatest strength of all. Yes, she had whispered, pulling him to his feet, her hands trembling as he slipped the imperfect, perfect ring onto her finger. 1,000 times. Yes. They had held each other in the forge that night, surrounded by the tools of her trade, the heat and light a blessing on their union. And Kiva had known, with a certainty that eclipsed all doubt, that she was exactly where she belonged. The wedding preparations consumed the next several months. The kingdom needed a celebration, needed something joyful after the darkness of Alara's disappearance and the revelation of the conspiracy. Corbin wanted to give his people a spectacle, but more than that, he wanted to give Kiva the wedding she deserved. I promise to stand beside you, Kiva whispered, holding Corbin's hands as the first light touched the horizon. To challenge you when you're wrong, support you when you're right, and love you through everything in between. I promise to be your partner, not your subject, your equal, not your subordinate. I promise to forge a future with you, one day at a time. Corbin's voice shook as he responded. I promise to honor your strength, never to diminish it. I promise to listen to your counsel, to value your opinion, to respect your independence. I promise to be gentle with your heart, fierce in your defense, and devoted to your happiness. I promise to love you not as a king loves a subject, but as a man loves his soulmate. Alara blessed their union with tears of joy, pressing her hands over their joined ones. May the moon watch over you both. May your love be the foundation of a dynasty that endures through ages. May you always remember that the strongest kingdoms are built not on power, but on the love between those who rule. When Corbin kissed his new wife, the sun broke fully over the horizon, bathing them in golden light. It felt like a benediction, like the universe itself was celebrating their union. The public ceremony that followed was grand and beautiful, but Kiva barely noticed the crowds, the flowers, the elaborate feast. Her focus was entirely on the man beside her, on the way he kept looking at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world, because to him, she was. That night, in the privacy of their chambers, Corbin traced the scars on her body with reverent fingers, each one a story of survival, of battles fought and won. "You're magnificent," he breathed, "every inch of you." Kiva explored his own scars with equal devotion, the marks of a warrior king, of a man who had fought for his throne and his people. "We're both warriors," she said softly. "Both survivors. Maybe that's why we fit so well together." "Maybe," he agreed, pulling her close. "Or maybe we were always meant to find each other. Two halves of a whole, separated by circumstance, brought together by fate, and a muggy night when you saved my mother's life. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been there that night?" Kiva mused. "If I had taken a different route, been just a few minutes later?" "I try not to," Corbin admitted, his arms tightening around her. "Because the thought of never meeting you, never knowing you, never loving you, that's more terrifying than any battle I've ever faced." They made love slowly, tenderly, exploring each other with the patience of those who had all the time in the world. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow renewed. When they finally came together, it felt like two souls merging, like the universe exhaling in satisfaction. Afterward, lying tangled in silk sheets, Kiva traced idle patterns on Corbin's chest. "I never thought I could have this," she confessed. "This kind of happiness, this kind of peace. I spent so long building walls, convincing myself I was better off alone. Thank you for being patient enough to wait for me to tear them down." "Thank you for being brave enough to try," he countered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I know it wasn't easy. Trusting me, trusting this. But Kiva, I swear to you, I will spend every day proving that your trust was well placed." And he did. Through the years that followed, through challenges and triumphs, through wars and peace, Corbin remained utterly devoted to his wife. He consulted her on every major decision, valued her counsel above all others, and never once forgot that she was his equal, not his accessory. Kiva flourished in her role as queen, surprising everyone with her natural diplomacy and fierce advocacy for the kingdom's most vulnerable citizens. She established training programs for young women who wanted to learn combat, opened workshops for artisans of all kinds, and used her own story to inspire others to believe in their own strength. But her greatest joy remained the forge. Even as queen, she refused to give up her craft, spending hours working steel, creating weapons and armor of legendary quality. Corbin would often join her there, finding peace in the rhythmic sound of her hammer, in the simple intimacy of watching her work. "You know," he said one evening, leaning against the doorframe of her workshop, "I never did get that first blade you promised me." Kiva looked up, confusion crossing her face. "What? Of course you did. I gave it to you on our wedding day, remember?" "That was a ceremonial blade," he clarified, moving closer. "Beautiful, perfect for display. But you never finished the working weapon I originally commissioned, the one we discussed during those first weeks." Understanding dawned, and Kiva smiled. "You're right. I got distracted." "Terribly distracted," he agreed, pulling her into his arms despite the coal dust covering her. "Think you could finally finish it? I'd like to carry a weapon made by my wife, something that combines her skill with my specifications. I think I could do that, Kiva murmured against his chest, but it'll cost you. Oh? And what's your price? Help me in the forge. Learn the craft. I want to make it together. Corbin laughed, surprised and delighted. A king learning blacksmithing? What will the council say? That their king is strong enough to learn new skills, humble enough to work with his hands, and wise enough to value his wife's knowledge. She pulled back, meeting his eyes with challenge in her own. Unless you're afraid? Terrified, he admitted with a grin. But when have I ever backed down from a challenge you issued? So they worked together, side by side in the forge, creating a blade that was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of their partnership, of the way they balanced each other, of the strength they found in unity. Corbin proved a diligent student, his warrior's discipline translating well to the patience required for metalwork. And Kiva proved a patient teacher, guiding his hands, showing him how to read the steel, how to know when it was ready. The blade they created was magnificent, perfectly balanced, sharp enough to split air, beautiful in its deadly simplicity. Corbin named it Moonfire, in honor of the night Kiva saved his mother beneath the full moon and the fire that burned in both their hearts. He carried it always after that, a constant reminder of the woman who had changed his life, the queen who had conquered his heart more thoroughly than he had ever conquered any territory. Years passed, bringing children, bringing trials, bringing joy and sorrow in equal measure. Through it all, Kiva and Corbin remained devoted to each other, their love deepening with time rather than fading. They ruled together, fought together, built a legacy together that would echo through generations. But perhaps their greatest legacy was the simple truth they proved every day, that strength and tenderness were not opposites but complements, that the fiercest warriors could have the gentlest hearts, that love could be both a weapon and a shield, a challenge and a comfort, a choice made new each morning. Kiva never forgot where she came from. She kept her forge active, still created weapons and armor with her own hands, refusing to let her title distance her from the craft that had shaped her. Young people came to learn from her, drawn by stories of the queen who had defeated 5 warriors bare-handed, who had risen from nothing to stand beside a king. She taught them more than blacksmithing. She taught them that strength came in many forms, that honor mattered more than victory, that protecting the weak was the highest calling any warrior could answer. Her students became a new generation of warriors, loyal not just to the crown, but to the ideals Kiva embodied. There were challenges, of course. Nobles who resented a commoner queen, who whispered that she lacked proper breeding, proper education. Kiva met their disdain with grace and competence, proving through action that worth had nothing to do with birth. She learned statecraft as she had learned combat, through dedication and relentless practice. She studied history and diplomacy, economics and law, refusing to be dismissed as merely the king's pretty wife. Corbin stood beside her through every challenge, his faith in her never wavering. When counselors questioned her presence at important meetings, he made it clear that she was his equal partner in rule, not a decorative accessory. When ambassadors from other kingdoms treated her with condescension, he made sure they understood that disrespecting his queen meant disrespecting him. "You don't need me to defend you," he told her one night after a particularly contentious council meeting. "I know you're more than capable of fighting your own battles, but I want them to understand that when they attack you, they attack us both. We're a unit, Kiva. Always." She had kissed him then, grateful beyond words for his support, for his understanding that strength didn't mean facing everything alone. Their first year of marriage brought a threat from the northern territories, raiders testing the kingdom's defenses, probing for weakness. The council recommended a military response, overwhelming force to crush the threat decisively. But Kiva suggested a different approach. "Send me," she had said, and the room had fallen silent. "Absolutely not," Corbin had responded immediately, fear flashing across his features. "Why not? I'm a proven warrior. I speak some of the northern dialects. And more importantly, sending the queen instead of an army sends a different message. She had met his eyes steadily, willing him to understand. It says we're not afraid. It says we believe in negotiation over bloodshed. It says we're strong enough to take risks for peace. The debate had raged for hours, but eventually, Corbin had agreed, though his worry had been evident in every line of his body. Kiva traveled north with a small escort, meeting the raiders on neutral ground. The negotiations were tense, fraught with the potential for violence, but Kiva's combination of martial prowess and genuine respect won them over. She understood their desperation, the failing harvests that had driven them to raid. She offered trade agreements, aid in the form of supplies and agricultural knowledge, in exchange for peace. She returned victorious, having averted war without a single life lost, and the kingdom celebrated her wisdom as much as her courage. Even the nobles who had doubted her had to acknowledge her success. "I was terrified every moment you were gone," Corbin confessed that night, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "But I was also so proud I thought my heart would burst." "You're remarkable, Kiva. You see solutions where others see only conflict." "I see people," she replied simply. "The raiders weren't monsters. They were desperate fathers trying to feed their children. How could I not try to help?" It was that compassion, married to strength, that defined Kiva's reign. She was fierce when fierceness was needed, protecting the vulnerable with the same intensity she had shown that night in the alley. But she was also merciful, always seeking to understand before condemning, to heal before harming. On their 20th anniversary, they returned to the alley where Kiva had first saved Alara. It was different now, cleaner, safer, transformed by the prosperity their joint rule had brought. But the moon hung in the same position, full and bright, casting silver shadows across cobblestones. "Do you ever regret it?" Corbin asked, holding her hand as they stood where violence had once erupted. "Saving her? Starting down this path that led you here?" Kiva looked up at the moon, remembering the girl she had been, alone and certain she preferred it that way. She thought of everything that had followed, the risks, the changes, the terrifying vulnerability of loving someone so completely. Then she looked at her husband, at the man who had proven that walls were meant to be climbed, that hearts were meant to be opened, that the greatest strength was sometimes found in surrender. "Not for a single moment," she said softly. "That night, I thought I was just saving an old woman from thieves. I had no idea I was saving my future, my family, my heart. Funny how the universe works, isn't it?" "Hilarious," Corbin agreed, pulling her close. "Though I prefer to think it was fate, that we were always meant to find each other, one way or another. You were always meant to be my queen, Kiva, and I was always meant to be the man lucky enough to love you." She kissed him then, beneath the same moon that had witnessed her first act of heroism, the same moon that had blessed their union, the same moon that would shine on their descendants long after they were gone. And in that kiss was everything they had built together, everything they had survived, everything they had become. Two warriors who had found peace in each other's arms. Two lonely souls who had discovered that the greatest battle was not against enemies, but against the fear of opening one's heart. Two people who had taken a chance on love and found that it was the most rewarding risk they had ever taken. As they walked back to the palace hand in hand, the moon watched over them with what might have been approval. And somewhere in the shadows, if one listened carefully, one might have heard the whisper of destiny satisfied, of a story written in the stars finally coming to its perfect conclusion. But it wasn't really an ending, of course. It was simply another beginning, another chapter in a love story that would be told and retold for generations, inspiring others to believe that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, in the most unlikely places, we find exactly what we didn't know we were searching for. Love, home, family, everything. Kiva had taken down 5 warriors to save an old lady, unaware she was the Alpha King's missing mother. But in saving Alara, she had ultimately saved herself, opening doors she thought permanently closed, finding a future she never dared to imagine. And every night, when the moon rose full and bright, she remembered that fateful evening when her life changed forever. She remembered the fear in an old woman's eyes, the sound of steel on flesh, the weight of a choice made in an instant. She remembered thinking she was alone in the world, that connection was weakness, that walls were safety. How wrong she had been, how gloriously, beautifully wrong, because now she knew the truth that Corbin had taught her, that Alara had shown her, that love itself had proven. The strongest fortress was not built of stone, but of trust. The greatest weapon was not a sword, but an open heart. And the most powerful magic in any kingdom was the simple act of 2 souls recognizing each other across the chaos of life and choosing, again and again, to hold on tight and never let go. That was their story. That was their triumph. That was their legacy. And it began, as all the best stories do, on a night when the moon hung full and bright, when a woman in a red dress heard a scream and chose to act, chose to fight, chose to save a stranger who would become family. Everything after was simply fate unfolding, destiny fulfilled, love finding its way home, as it always does, as it always will. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.